Snow churned beneath her feet as Clara stumbled through the darkened woods, the sound of gunfire still echoing behind her like angry thunder, rolling down the mountains, and every breath she took burned her throat as if the winter itself wanted to swallow her whole. Yet she clutched the tiny infant to her chest with a ferocity that came not from strength but from desperation, her arms trembling but unyielding as she used her own body as a shield against the bullets that had chased her from the burning cabin she once called home, her blue dress torn, her skin scratched by branches, and her heartbeat hammering with equal parts terror and resolve, because she knew that if she fell, the child would fall with her, and she refused to let that happen, even if it meant her own life draining away into the snow beneath her. And so she pushed forward, half blind from tears and cold, stumbling deeper into the wilderness as the world dimmed, the wind howling like wolves tracking her footsteps. Somewhere behind her, men on horseback shouted to one another, their torches flickering through the trees, their horses snorting steam into the frozen night. They were hunters, trained, relentless, fueled by greed and orders she didn't fully understand. But she knew one truth: if they caught her, the baby would be ripped away and likely never see daylight again, and that was enough to make her run until her legs finally gave out beneath her, sending her crashing to her knees in a drift of snow so deep she nearly disappeared into it. Yet even then, Clara curled herself over the child like a shield of flesh and bone, whispering shaky promises that she would keep him safe no matter what. The infant whined softly, a weak little sound that tore at her heart, and Clara forced herself back up, her vision blurring at the edges, her muscles screaming, as she dragged herself toward the cluster of pines where she might hide long, enough to catch her breath, her body numb, her fingertips blue, but her spirit stubborn as iron because she had taken an oath long before this night, an oath as a nurse, sworn to save lives, even if it cost her own. And when the men had stormed the cabin, demanding she give over the child she'd been tasked to protect, she knew they were not men of mercy. They were thieves of life, hunting the boy for reasons, whispered only in the terrified voice of the old doctor she had worked under, a doctor who had fallen with a bullet before he could say more. She pressed herself against a tree, panting, her breath fogging around her, the child pressed against her chest, and she tried to think, to plan. But the cold weighed on her eyelids like lead, tugging her downward, begging her to sleep, and she might have given in if not for the sudden thunder of hooves, approaching, closer, closer, forcing her body to jolt upright, one last time as she summoned her remaining strength to run again. She didn't get far before her foot struck a fallen branch hidden under the snow, sending her tumbling violently down a shallow slope, her cry muffled by the soft powder, and she twisted mid-fall to make sure the baby landed on top of her rather than beneath. Pain shot through her ribs, her shoulder, her knees, but she held the child close even as she came to stop at the base of the slope, gasping, trembling, and finally unable to rise again as darkness crept over her mind like closing curtains. The world spun slowly, the trees stretching like shadows, and just as she felt the cold seep into her bones like a final embrace, she heard another sound, not the rough, angry shouts of the men chasing her, but the low, steady approach of a single horse, its hooves crunching through the snow with a calmness that felt out of place in the chaos, and then a voice, deep, warm, commanding, calling out into the forest, and hello? Anyone out here? She tried to call back, but only a soft wheeze escaped her cracked lips. Still, it was enough for the rider to change direction, urging his horse toward the sound until he came into view, a tall, broad-shouldered cowboy, with rough stubble on his jaw and a fur pelt draped over his muscular frame, his breath steaming in the cold, his sharp eyes scanning the ground until they landed on her half-buried figure. And the moment he saw the baby in her arms, something fierce and protective sparked in his gaze as he jumped from his saddle and ran to her. "Ma'am, hey, stay with me," he said, his voice steady even as urgency burned beneath it, and he knelt beside her, brushing snow from her hair and checking her pulse with a practiced hand. Realizing with a jolt of alarm how cold she had become, she was slipping away, freezing yet still clinging to the infant with a grip so tight he had to carefully pry her fingers loose just enough to examine the child, who whimpered weakly but was still alive. "You did good," he murmured, speaking to her but unsure if she could hear. "You kept him safe. Now let me keep both of you safe." The cowboy removed his fur pelt and wrapped it around the woman and the infant together, gathering them into his powerful arms with a gentleness he didn't know he still possessed. A gentleness he thought he'd buried years ago, along with the grief of losing his own family to violence. And as he lifted her, Clara's eyes fluttered half open, a whisper escaping her cracked lips. "Don't let them take him." And he leaned close, replying with a voice dipped in iron. "Over my dead body." He carried her toward his horse, moving swiftly yet silently, knowing instinctively that whoever had done this was close, that danger was creeping through the trees, with torches and guns and murder in their hearts. And as he secured Clara and the baby on the saddle in front of him, holding her upright with one arm while taking the reins with the other, he scanned the forest once more. His jaw clenched, his breath steady, the resolve of a man who had just found something worth fighting for again. "Hang on." He